The meeting between American negotiators and Putin at the Kremlin lasted more than 5 hours and ended after midnight. All proposals were reviewed, but no compromises have been reached so far. These 2 points sum up everything the Russian side announced as a result. Why does Moscow not want to discuss the details of this meeting? Was it productive? And why did Putin once again threaten Ukraine and Europe? Let's break it down. The negotiations with the American envoys, Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, were scheduled to start at 5 p.m. Moscow time. But as the scheduled time approached, the guests from Washington were told that Putin was supposedly very busy, and they were offered a walk around the Russian capital, a visit to the New Year's market, and dinner at one of the restaurants. Many political commentators note that this day was orchestrated down to the smallest detail. And the fact that the negotiations started 3.5 hours late was no accident either. Putin deliberately emphasized that he had priorities more important than the arrival of the American delegation.
At first, the Kremlin specified the exact time when the Russian-American meeting would take place. Even an hour later, Putin was still delivering his speech at the previous event. Making delegations wait and forcing them to adjust their plans is a tactic the Russian leader has used before to try to gain an advantage in negotiations. From a CNN report,
while the American envoys languished in anticipation, Putin, at a forum hosted by one of the banks, unleashed yet another round of threats against European countries. He essentially accused the European Union of escalating the situation and hinted at Russia's readiness for military action. With a sly smirk, he spoke about certain realities on the ground and claimed that if Europe starts a war with the Russian Federation, Moscow supposedly won't even have anyone to negotiate with. In addition, the Kremlin dictator once again claimed that European politicians have no peace agenda and, supposedly, only interfere with the United States' efforts to end the war in Ukraine.
Putin did not specify exactly which European demands on Ukraine he considers unacceptable, but his statements seemed aimed at driving a wedge between Washington and the European capitals that supported Kyiv in proposing to revise the 28-point peace plan developed during previous contacts between the US and Russia. After all, in its original version, this plan was much more favorable to Moscow. From a publication by The Guardian,
Putin also stated that he is ready to intensify strikes on Ukraine's maritime infrastructure in response to attacks on Russian tankers. Moreover, this could include not only ports, but any ships that enter Ukrainian harbors. Thus, the Kremlin is effectively putting international shipping at risk and once again resorting to open blackmail. Ukraine's Ministry of Foreign Affairs responded harshly, emphasizing that such rhetoric only confirms Moscow's unwillingness to take any steps toward ending a war.
For the second day in a row, Putin has made statements indicating that he does not intend to stop the war. Yesterday, he said he was ready to fight all winter. Today, he's threatening seaports and the freedom of navigation. These threats are primarily directed against Odesa, about which President Trump spoke very warmly. Russia must stop the bloodshed that has started itself. If this does not happen and Putin spits in the face of the world again, there must be consequences. Russia must stop wasting the world's time, which should be a time of peace. Andrea Sabiha, Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, on social network X.
It's no surprise that after 5 hours of talks in the Kremlin, Putin's aide Yuri Ushakov said that there is still no compromise plan to end the war in Ukraine. According to analysts from the Institute for the Study of War, Russia has effectively rejected the proposals from the US and Ukraine developed in Geneva and has not agreed to any compromises that contradict its original military objectives. Putin was critical of most points in the peace plan. Russia is only willing to show flexibility on secondary issues. That is why, according to experts, they have decided not to speak publicly about the outcome of these negotiations for now.
The Kremlin plans to refrain from publicly discussing the results of the meeting in order to conceal Russia's rejection of the U.S.-Ukrainian peace proposal. High-ranking Kremlin officials, including Putin, have consistently rejected the 28-point peace plan and its subsequent versions since it was first presented in mid-November 2025. because the proposed plans did not meet all of Russia's maximalist military demands. From the report of the Institute for the Study of War,
Putin is only willing to discuss ending the war on his own terms. All previous negotiations, both with the US and with Ukraine, have failed to bring the long awaited peace. Each time, the Kremlin delegation either made unrealistic demands or simply ignored the negotiation process. At the same time, the aggressor country has not stopped shelling Ukrainian cities and killing civilians for even a single day. That's why most leading global media outlets are skeptical about yet another round of talks in Moscow.
Putin has shown no signs of backing down from his demand for Ukraine's de facto surrender. Neither the previous talks in Istanbul, nor the August summit in Alaska between Trump and Putin, nor the 5 prior visits by Witkoff to Moscow have led to any softening of the Kremlin stance or its belligerent rhetoric. So far, there are no signs that yet another round of negotiations will bring any changes to Moscow's position. From a Politico publication,
The only language Putin understands is strength and sanctions. NATO countries must maintain pressure on Russia as the negotiation process drags on. This was stated by the organization's Secretary General, Mark Rutte, ahead of the alliance's foreign ministers meeting. He refrained from commenting on the negotiations in Moscow between the US and Russia, but emphasized that the dialogue between the Ukrainian and American teams was successful and that the Kremlin must not be allowed to undo all this progress.
the best way to put pressure on the Russians is to do 2 things. First, make it clear to the Russians that the steady flow of weapons to Ukraine will continue. That's exactly what's happening today, thanks to the U.S. and Europeans. The U.S. is sending its most important equipment to Ukraine, paid for by Canada and European allies. Second, it's necessary to ensure the effectiveness of economic sanctions. That's exactly what's happening now. The U.S. and Europe are working together to make sure the sanctions have the maximum impact on the Russian economy. This is the best way to change Putin's calculations.
In order to prevent Russian aggression from happening again in just a year, Kyiv needs clear and understandable security guarantees. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated this during his first official visit to Ireland. He emphasized that any decision to end the war must be fair and take Ukraine's interests into account. At the same time, the head of state stressed that there will be no easy solutions right now.
This visit to Ireland is taking place at one of the most difficult yet optimistic moments. Now, more than ever, there is a chance to put an end to this war. We understand what is happening. We understand who we are dealing with. The issue is not the difficulty of making decisions. Those who are capable of making them will make them. I am capable of making decisions. It is important that all of this is fair and transparent, that there are no backroom deals behind Ukraine's back, that nothing about us or our future is decided without Ukraine.
Well, during these negotiations, Putin once again used his usual tactics. He rescheduled the meeting time, put forward unrealistic and completely unfounded demands, resorted to blackmail, made threats, and tried to present himself as the victim. As a result, the negotiations ended without any agreed decisions, and the key issues remained unresolved. And here we can see another tactic of the Kremlin, dragging things out and prolonging the bloody war for as long as possible.